Perhaps I start with acknowledging the Honorable Minister, whom I understand has to rush off to another engagement. It's a very busy week, this one, in eThekwini, on the very subject matter that brings us here today. It's an exciting time for all of us. Having said that, also acknowledge the President of the FTTX, President Ngaba, the CEO, Ms. Clark, dignitaries, captains of industry, colleagues, friends. I think let us also start by congratulating the Council for co-hosting this exciting event. We come here today as an opportunity for us to start speaking to the industry on a matter that admittedly only more recently has started becoming a big priority for us. You've noted some of the glitches that are identified in the local government space. We've recently prioritized this in the conference of 2016, and we anticipate co-creating this journey together with all that are in the room here today. Perhaps as we grapple with bedding down this message in local government and perhaps at a personal level by all those who are playing a role in that space. Perhaps on my part to relay a small anecdote. I had a conversation with my little daughter and their friends. As we are told, these young ones are always a step ahead of all of us in this digital space. But the conversation there was not necessarily about technology and digitization. It was for another school assignment. So we asked, what are the basic needs of human beings? Well taught in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I expected my clever daughter to, do so accordingly. But without hesitation, she started. Wi-Fi. Of course, broadband, and a far distance, and there was clothes, of course, the nice fancy clothes that she wants, food, housing, and so it goes. I still struggle to get her to eat every time. I think they've turned around Maslow's hierarchy of needs as we currently know it. And while it is a bit uncomfortable for me because I need her to pass the exam where indeed if she's asked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so I need to reorientate her a little bit. But we need to make sure that that message resonates with all of us. It's one thing dealing with the exam, but it's another to ensure that Maslow's hierarchy of needs also resonates with the current order of the day. Perhaps another example, you go to a remote village, Solo in the Eastern Cape, or Makong in the Free State, an old gogo, you speak to her, a cell phone rings, and she pulls it out of some corner there, and she talks. She no longer has to rely on the telegraph, which she used back in her day, let alone the email. She's right here on text. In fact, my dad was recently learning how to use WhatsApp. So the reality is that these things are changing, and they're changing quite fast. The penetration of mobile telephony has far surpassed fixed line technology. So in the remotest of those villages that I've just made reference to, the old gogo has access to a cell phone. In fact, those phones are becoming smarter and smarter. At this point in time, you also have very cheap, cost-effective cell phones. Perhaps a last example, just to demonstrate that penetration and the smartness of the telephone, is that I rode a taxi not so long ago, 2 years ago. Yes, I do ride a taxi occasionally, and not just in public transport month. I sat in the front seat there with the driver. I learned that his name is Sbu. After arguing about the derby that was coming up in a few days' time, I won't say what my line of argument was. At the tail end of that argument, as I was about to leave, we happened to talk about the weather. The weather on the day of the derby. Quickly pulled out the phone, click, 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 says, no, the weather is going to be fine, so you have no excuses. That is just another of many, many examples of how in some of the simplest ways, other than, of course, the well-made case about how connectivity, telephony is useful for productivity in business and industry. But even at a socio-economic level, at the grassroots level, where we need to provide some of the basic services, the desire for connectivity is becoming a pressure that we cannot continue to ignore. In that context, as I said earlier, with the turn of the local government transitions, every time there's a municipal election, at SALGA there's also an election. With the new elected leaders, there's a new strategic agenda and new priorities. In December 2016, we were given marching orders that we must prioritize the delivery of broadband. Yes, there are these glitches that have been made reference to, but the marching orders that I have received from my principals is to work together with the department, with the likes of the FTTH and yourselves to make sure that we undo those glitches. There are some technicalities though that we need to work around. But perhaps to drive that point home is that broadband and connectivity should now be delivered as a basic service in the same order as water, sanitation, electricity, and waste. In fact, we've coined it as delivering the fifth utility. So perhaps Rethabile was not so off the mark after all when she put connectivity at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, that is in her world. In the municipalities world, it has been reinterpreted slightly to say that in whatever the order, but the broadband needs to be added into those basket of basic services. So that's where we're at. Those are the marching orders. And in fact, if I could leave this conference here today with just that message to say, that is a priority that has been set. We have a few thoughts. We would like that by the end of today or tomorrow, that we'll probably have shared in the more detailed discussions later on what this implies. As we continue to detail out our submissions, which also will have regulatory implications, will hopefully have a normalizing effect in the financial models. I understand that there is differences in the finances of how this is delivered between Cape Town, Johannesburg, eThekwini. Hopefully, if we take a consistent approach across the sector, some of those bottlenecks would be unraveled. Perhaps taking that debate to the global level, I refer to one of the global elders, a member of the group of eminent persons, the late former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, who during the first meeting of the United Nations Working Group on Informatics emphasized the enormous possibilities of ICTs. So we're taking our cues from there as well. In fact, he challenged us whether we're really capitalizing on those opportunities. Of course, our answer is an emphatic no. Do we desire to continue to exploit those? Of course, the answer is another emphatic yes. Do we have all the solutions? Do we have all the modalities? Perhaps not quite. I implore all of us here today and other partners that might not necessarily be in the room to assist us in co-creating that journey. So while we agree that in the last few decades, ICTs have moved rapidly from simply being an enterprise resource for productivity to now becoming the defining force of economic competitiveness within the emerging global economic order of the 21st century, we also agree that there is still much more that we need to do in order to achieve the full potential. Currently, ICTs provide unprecedented promise for social and economic development at a global scale. These technologies, based on the model of information societies, have formed the basis for a radical shift from the previous industrial revolutions to the new paradigm, as has been referred to earlier, which we are referring to as the fourth industrial revolution. This shift promises to redefine the areas of work, learning, research, leisure, entertainment, healthcare, etc., etc. I was also having a conversation not so long ago with another colleague in a different space, and they were talking about the advent of you possibly not having to go to a clinic when you have some minor ailments, that there perhaps will be no need for a general practitioner doctor. There perhaps is increasingly less need for accountants. The softwares that we have now are generating all of that. Legal services. Perhaps unless your legal cases become more and more complicated, there is a plethora of information that is stored somewhere and that can be accessed, provided the infrastructure is correct. That for us turns on its head the way that we do business, the way that we've created our policy environment in municipalities and in the state as a whole. I'm not even talking about the ICT policy and regulatory environment. I'm talking about the financial modeling. Some of the difficulties that you have is on the basis of us trying to find ways to navigate in financial terms. The regulatory environment in terms of powers and functions, the interpretations of those are creating difficulties for us to interact with one another. Perhaps it is because we're trying to tweak at the edges something that was said earlier on, that it is not going to be a gradual addition on a few steps in the right direction. It probably requires a radical shift in the way that we do things. I have a few cases to try and demonstrate the importance of this thing. I think I'll be preaching to the converted. So my colleagues, if you would allow me to skip a little bit of that, maybe just to bring it home to the municipal space, that we are monitoring that space quite closely, because for us there is some very real benefits. If we highlight just a few of those benefits, and they are endless. And some of you might have participated in various areas, and I might again be preaching to the converted. We see, although we're not wired like that currently, advent of remote sensing and satellite imagery which may help to locate blocked stormwater drains and therefore enable a much more rapid response to avoid leakages and perhaps storms that weaken our infrastructure. Drones, sensors, and big data-powered simulations using artificial intelligence perhaps can assist us to improve our urban planning and urban management systems, improving the operations and maintenance of municipalities' existing infrastructure. Perhaps the service usage can be tracked with more smart meters over the network, allowing accurate tracking, resulting hopefully in cost savings for the municipalities. Some of the financial challenges we are creating for ourselves is a result of the inefficiencies and the leakages in the monies from the coffers of the municipality. So the fourth industrial revolution, albeit in its infancy, is apparent in various South African industries as they adopt automation to increase productivity and drive down these costs. The manufacturing industry and agriculture and food security being some of the two most notable industries. Of course, in our part, we have a small town regeneration program in the Karoo. The square kilometer array and what it is doing to that part of town is phenomenal. To some of us around the room here, that SKA is probably the poster child of big data. Looking closer to home, municipalities big and small are obliged to play a key role in this sector as it holds several keys to enablement, the municipalities. We need to speed up the rollout of broadband infrastructure in order for industry to move more rapidly ahead. Of course, high-speed broadband also offer them the ability to participate in the digital economy, as we indicated. Areas of productivity include connecting facilities such as schools, clinics, libraries, and all sorts of other socio-economic centers. Simultaneously, the infrastructure will also allow for security and surveillance and monitoring, security being a key challenge in our society currently. The ability to digitize water treatment plants, water management plants, electrical substations, residential and business water metering requires that these facilities are equipped with IoT sensors to provide intelligent data decision-making, and this should hopefully remove human error, which itself also creates financial losses and losses in productivity and so on. But there are challenges, yeah? So maybe while we share in this journey, and while we are very excited about what this could mean, I would like to take a moment to address one or two of the concerns. Well, on the one hand, as the demand for fiber-based services increases, the market has become almost like a gold rush as companies race to be the first to stake their claims on the most lucrative neighborhoods, estates, business parks, etc. This has led to a surge in the deployment of high-speed broadband networks in South Africa, but according to our member municipalities, this has also resulted in a bit of some unscrupulous behavior in certain instances. Perhaps unwittingly so, maybe it is not deliberate, it is in the context of trying to take advantage of the first mover. So while we are clear that ICTs and broadband are an integral part and the non-negotiable part of our future, it is essential that the deployment of these services is done in an orderly, responsible, but of course consistent manner. And we are up to the task. We are wanting to walk this journey to ensure that, that enablement in our environment. In the current manner in which the rollout of services are taking place, it unfortunately leads to disruption of services in certain instances, damage to water pipes, electricity cables, as well as a poor reinstatement of roads, which occasionally leads to potholes. This becomes an additional burden to already strained coffers of the municipality. Of course, the increase in demand for way leaves, I think, which has been elaborated on quite a bit this morning, is placing an additional strain on the resources of the municipality, who are under pressure to find ways to absorb these costs. And they are ready to play a financial contribution to ensure that these way leaves are designed, structured, and built correctly. But let us also be cognizant of some of the financial pressures that at least some of the municipalities are under. But at the same time, it is encouraging to learn that the rapid deployment policy is imminent. This document, whose main aim is to address some of these issues and support both public and private sector, will go a long way towards ironing out these issues. SALGA, as I've said, endeavors to work with the department and the council and all the role players to address the different bottlenecks in a mutually beneficial, mutually reinforcing manner. Perhaps allow me to end with a small trepidation. And that is the unattractiveness of some places, rural areas, villages, rural towns, and that while we understand the high cost of the infrastructure rollout, it is essential that we make sure that this new revolution does not leave others behind. So we know and have seen already others who are capitalizing on these opportunities, but let's make sure that it does not unwittingly create new forms of exclusion. As I was making the case earlier, I skipped some of the, I guess, common campaigns that we've seen, the hashtag data must fall campaigns, right? Now again, that is common cause. So while I will not elaborate on that, because I think it's common cause to everybody, we need to be conscious and consciously find solutions to ensure that that new form of exclusion is managed out. Of course, it remains the responsibility of the state, but save for increasing the cost of this infrastructure that will be transferred to you, maybe we can find one way or the other that makes sure that we don't have to transfer some of those costs. That makes sure that we don't have to increase taxes and levies and other service charges elsewhere. I think it can be done. It's just a matter of how well and how committed we are to finding a common solution. We need to explore options that will make this more viable, and in doing so, we have to consider models that, for example, ensure better uptake of the services, such considerations must include a dig once or a single trench model. So when we've created that infrastructure, can we all be able to coexist in that based on an open access principles? So while open access networks spare competition among service providers, it will hopefully eliminate the duplication of expensive infrastructure, which again results in financial inefficiencies and undermine the economic justification for all the different role players. Perhaps as I race to the end, Program Director, is that on the one hand, a single open access network where basic infrastructure is available on an equal and equitable basis to many service providers should hopefully persuade all providers to extend their networks into these unviable areas. It's probably not a very popular sentiment, but if you could understand where we're coming from to try and ensure equity. The provision and facilitation of broadband infrastructure must be seen as part of a logical extension of municipal utility mandate, the fifth utility, as I said. It is also important for many municipalities, especially those in underserviced areas, to leverage their rights of ways, poles, personnel, and other available street furniture to further drive down costs associated with the deployment, while realizing the potential for generating incremental revenue for its rentals. So yes, we need to absorb some of the costs, but there's also opportunities to generate a little bit here and there in a manner that hopefully will not create too much pressure. In conclusion, there's an abundance of evidence which has been said by all and sundry that supports the fact that the proliferation of affordable high-speed broadband stimulates economic growth, achieve higher educational standards, and deliver greater efficiencies in providing social and economic services to our communities. South African municipalities, both big and small, should explore the opportunities and capabilities that ICT presents for addressing the need for accelerated socio-economic growth and, of course, the democratic dividend. I would like to urge all of us in deploying these high-speed telecommunications infrastructure, particularly with the view of enabling delivery of this fifth utility in a consistent and cost-effective manner, that in certain parts of the program, I think especially in a workshop session later tomorrow, that we can be able to discuss and debate what this idea of universal access, what this idea of the fifth utility actually means. I've been quite reluctant to start putting on the table what those initial thoughts are, because we're still in the process of researching them. But perhaps some of those conversations that will happen later in the session can give us some of the answers. And on that note, I would like to wish you well in the deliberations and look forward to those solutions, which hopefully will enable us to create this legacy for the little girl, for Ugogo, and for the SMME enterprises that we are looking to support. And of course, a legacy that hopefully all of us can be able to prosper in and grow. On that note, I thank you very much.